Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of Let's Play. Today we're going to be taking a look at the A2A Simulations Piper Cub with AccuSim rebuilt for prepared. So the A2A Cub is a simulation of the Piper J-3 Cub. You can see it here, painted in its distinctive yellow with black lightning bolt paint scheme. The Piper Cub is a lot of things, but it's easier to talk about what it's not. It is not a complex aircraft. This aircraft has a 65 horsepower engine, 65 horsepower four-cylinder engine. You can expect a cruise speed of around 75 knots. It doesn't even have an electrical system. As you can see, there are no lights on the airplane, so you won't be flying this at night. It's a very straightforward tailwheel airplane with very few systems to worry about. Very fun to fly and a great way to be introduced to tailwheel flying, barnstorming, and all the other fun things you can do with an aircraft like this. In typical A2A fashion, we have ourselves a mini controls window where you can set different controls on the aircraft. We can remove the tie downs and the control lock. As a tailwheel pilot, I was always taught to lock the controls whenever you walk away from the aircraft, even if it's just for a second. You can see when you lock the controls, the elevator comes up. Always important to tie the aircraft down too when you're not using it. The Cub's a very light aircraft. It doesn't take much wind to cause it to want to lift off and bang around. Let's also go to the payload page. You see we can load up a pilot and a passenger. The passenger's name is Heidi. She comes in 4 different personalities. In the calm personality, she's not really fazed by aerobatics or flight. She'll be helpful. She'll point out traffic. She'll occasionally compliment your landing or something like that. The nervous personality is the polar opposite. Nervous Heidi really does not like flying. She really wants a smooth ride. She doesn't like turbulence. She doesn't like steep turns. Fun Heidi loves aerobatics and doesn't mind doing crazy things. And then lastly, Silent Heidi will just occasionally cough or make other human noises, but won't talk. The Cub only carries 12 gallons of gas, so it's typical to fill it up before each flight. 12 gallons doesn't sound like a lot, but at 4 gallons per hour, that gives you 3 full hours of flying. But of course, at 75 miles an hour, you're not going to get very far in 3 hours. And the Cub also stores about 4 quarts of oil. You can see all 4 boxes here are full, so we're good on oil. And lastly, the baggage has a maximum load of 20 pounds. We'll put like 10 pounds in to simulate maybe having a small AOG kit in there. The last thing you get with the Cub is a portable radio. Remember, the Cub doesn't have an electrical system, so if you need to talk on the radio, you're going to be using this. You just turn it on by pressing the power knob here. The radio only has about 2 hours of battery life, so I'd recommend turning it off when you're in cruise or another situation where you don't need the radio. But for the most part, Piper Cubs are flown out of airports like this. This is Pope Valley, California. There's definitely no radio needed here. So as I mentioned, we're parked at Pope Valley in Wine Country, California. We're going to make a quick flight from here to Angwin Parrot Airport. It's a very short flight, and I'll introduce you to the basics of the Cub. If you purchase the A2A Cub, you get 3 other models, one with tundra tires, one with skis, and one with floats. And we'll be checking those out later. But for now, let's hop in the pit and get started. All right, welcome to the Cub pit. The first and most obvious thing you'll notice is that Heidi blocks a lot of our view, and this is pretty typical for a Cub, which is always flown from the back seat. If you've got a passenger, you're going to be spending a lot of time looking to the left and right around their head to see what's going on. So that's actually pretty realistic, pretty typical. The other thing you might notice is that the rudder pedals on a Cub work a little differently than you might expect from other aircraft. The top part of the pedals is used to move the rudder, and the bottom part of the pedals is used to set the brakes. So this is the opposite of what you might be used to for most GA aircraft, where you push in on with your toes to brake and you push in with your heels to move the rudder. Cub has openable doors. You can open them with a click here. It's a little more complicated in real life. The top door latches and the bottom door just swings down. Heidi will complain about the heat if it gets hot. If she does that, just feel free to open a door or a window, and then you click up here to close the door again. In real life, you kind of have to line up some pins here, and it's a little more complicated, but they made it easy for you in the sim. We've also got a window here. It can be cracked or fully open or shut, and we'll leave it fully open to give ourselves some air because it might be a hot day. There is not a whole lot of other controls in the Cub. As you can see, it's a very simple aircraft. It's easy to start, easy to fly. The first thing you want to do when you start it is find someone to help you start it, because it has no electrical system and no starter, so it has to be hand propped. I recommend in real life that you never hand prop your own aircraft by yourself without the help of a qualified assistant, unless it's some kind of emergency, like you're stuck in the middle of nowhere somewhere and there's no one else to help you. But in this case, in the sim, we don't have any qualified assistance, and Heidi's not going to be willing to help. So we're going to have to do our own hand prop and start. So we'll just try to be careful and not take off any fingers when we do. So in order to hand prop, first thing we got to do is prime the engine. Now a Cub, you do not have to prime if the temperature is above about 40 degrees Fahrenheit. If it's below 40, I would prime it once. If it's below 20, I'd prime it twice. But right now it's pretty warm out, so we're not going to have to worry about that. So I'm just going to leave it how it is, and we're not going to prime it. The other thing you can do is prime the carburetor, and you do that by moving the propeller backwards until you reach a compression stroke. And then, there we go, kind of rocking it back and forth between two compression strokes. And that should get some gas into the carburetor, and that will also help with the start. Of course, you never want to move the propeller without first confirming that the mags are off. And that's exactly what your assistant would do if you were to start the aircraft. They would say mags off, you'd say mags off. They would say brakes, you would set the brakes and say brakes, and then they would say contact, and you would move the switch to both, and they would then run the propeller. But if we're just going to do it by ourselves, all we got to do first of all is just set the fuel to on, set the mags to both, stand on the brakes, crack the throttle just a teeny weeny bit, and then we will go out to the hand start view. We'll move the propeller until it's at about a 45-degree angle, and then all we got to do is give it a good spin, and the engine starts right up. Pretty easy to start on a nice warm day. Let's go out back to the cockpit view, just look over Heidi and verify that the oil pressure has come up. You don't want to taxi until the oil temp is above 40. It's a 50-degree day out today, so the oil temperature is already above 40 and we're already good to taxi. Let's set the power to 1,000 RPM. And we have started the aircraft. We're all good. Next thing we can do is just verify that the altimeter is reading field elevation. As you can tell, it is a sensitive altimeter. We do have a Colesman knob. It just turns the faceplate of the altimeter, so let's just make sure it's showing about 600 feet. There is no 100-foot hand, just a 1,000-foot hand, so you're not going to be holding any precise altitudes with this aircraft, but that's fine. All right, let's taxi. So the winds are calm, so we can use either direction for the runway, so I'm just going to taxi up here to the start of the runway. So whenever we taxi in the Cub, we always want to set the controls for the wind. Since there's no ambient wind, we'll just hold the stick back to keep the tail planted. The other thing you always want to do in a tail wheel like the Cub is make S-turns to improve your visibility. Since you can't look through the nose, you just want to make left and right turns as you move so that you have a view out the left and right side of the aircraft, and make sure you don't hit any obstructions, you see anybody who's crossing in front of you, stuff like that. All right, let's come to a stop before the start of the runway, and we'll do our pre-flight checks, starting with the controls. We'll just verify that the flight controls work how we expect. Great. And now we'll check the instruments. So we would verify heading against runway heading, verify altitude. We would, of course, verify that our oil temperature is above 40 degrees and our oil pressure is still good. We want to just make sure our trim is set. So with 2 people in the aircraft, we want to trim just a bit nose back, or just a bit nose up, like so. And we would verify carb heat's off, fuel's on, mags are both. Now we can do our run up. It's done at 1800 RPM. So we'd set 1800 RPM. Not much to do in the run up. We just check the mags. And check the carb heat. Carb heat takes a little while to come on, but it's pretty obvious when it does. All right, and carb heat off. All right, so before we get going, another thing you want to do in an aircraft like this, which has poor visibility, is just make a quick 360 to see if there's anybody else around. This is clearly not a busy airport, so maybe it's not the most important thing here, but it's a good habit to get into. An easy way to make a 360 in a Cub like this is to increase power to maybe about like 1500 or so, and then use a little bit of forward stick to raise the tail, like so. And then now you should be able to turn on the ground with brakes basically on a dime. Makes it really easy to look around and also make tight turns. And when you're done doing that, just slowly let the tail come back. Don't slam it on the ground. and you can bring the power back. That's a quick Cub turn. All right, let's get out of here. So for takeoff, we will just do full power, and we will, with a little bit of forward pressure, let the tail come up. There we go. And the airplane should more or less lift off by itself around 45, 50 knots, or sorry, miles per hour. And up we go. Best rated climb is at 55, so we'll climb at 55 miles per hour. You notice I still have the window open. That's totally fine. You can fly the Cub with the windows, the doors open, however you like. You'll just take a little bit of a drag penalty. But if you're worried about drag penalties, you're flying the wrong aircraft. As you can see, we don't have an excellent rate of climb. Our best rate, 55 miles an hour, is probably about 400 feet per minute at best. But that's Cub life. You're probably never going to fly this thing above 3,000 feet AGL anyway. In theory, it has a ceiling of 11,500, but it would take you the better part of a year to get up there. All right, we're going southeast now, so let's turn southwest and kind of point it towards Angwin. Turns in the Cub are pretty easy. There is no inclinometer, so you don't have a visual indication of whether you're coordinated in the turn. You kind of just have to visualize the nose position. Make sure the aircraft isn't slipping or skidding in that turn. But one thing the Cub can do is turn on a dime. I can just start a quick steep turn here with a little bit more altitude. We can do a quick 45-degree turn. Again, I have calm Heidi in the aircraft, so hopefully she doesn't mind this too much. You can see she grabs onto a pole for support. And the aircraft turns quite smartly at a 45-degree bank. Stalls in the Cub are also really uneventful. It's pretty difficult to drop a single wing or otherwise get into a really screwy stall. To stall in the Cub, all you got to do first of all when reducing power is bring the carb heat on. Always do that. And just hold the stick back at idle power. You'll notice the Cub doesn't really stall, it just starts mushing and falling quite rapidly. To recover, just let the nose fall, full power, and once you get flying speed, bring the nose back up. So you can stall the Cub is a great way to lose altitude really quickly. Let's turn the carb heat back off now too. All right, let's work our way over to Angwin. All right, we've reached Angwin Parrot Airport. As is always the case when landing at small isolated airports like this, it's a good idea to overfly the field, verify the condition, check the windsock and stuff like that before you enter the patterns. We'll do that now. All right, field condition looks good. I'm gonna head out for the 45 and then we will enter the traffic pattern and land.
Plane, 3 o'clock.
There's an example of Heidi calling out traffic that she sees. She won't call out traffic that she can't actually see from her seated position, which is pretty nice. All right, we're entering the downwind. Not much to do on the downwind except turn on the carb heat because we'll be reducing power soon. There is no such thing as too high in a Cub, is what they say. The Cub has a million great ways to lose altitude. All of them are very effective. So if you're not sure, just aim to be too high. It's much easier to descend than it is to climb in this aircraft. Beam the numbers, let's reduce power. Start our descent. There's the tricolor Vassie. It's showing us too high, so I'm going to slip into this turn as a way to help lose altitude. Both wheel landings and 3-pointers are pretty straightforward in the Cub. I'm going to do a wheel landing and try to give Heidi a nice smooth landing that she won't yell at me for. Slowly let the speed come back while we inch it closer to the runway.
Wow, you are a great pilot.
Thanks, Heidi. Now, as is always the case with tailwheel aircraft, do not come on the brakes until you are slow enough that doing so won't flip the aircraft onto its back. Once you've landed, plant the tailwheel by moving the stick back and start your S-turns. The other thing you want to do once you're on the ground, turn off the carb heat, so that way don't start sucking in dust and debris from the runway. The carb heat also acts as a secondary engine air source. It's a source of unfiltered air in case your primary air source gets blocked. All right, here's the turnaround point. We'll turn around here and back taxi, so we'll just make another quick Cub turn. So tail up, bring it around, and then let the tail come back. Now we got a long way to back taxi, and rather than going slow and making S-turns the whole way, we can just increase power, bring the tail up, get a nice good view of the runway ahead of us, and then just fast taxi down the runway. When we back taxi, we always want to be to the left or right of the center line to improve our visibility and also let other aircraft know what we're doing. I'm just trying to look over Heidi's head, get a good view of the runway. Just make sure you don't take off again. And be careful when you do this. Remember, once you come off the tail wheel and you're only on 2 gear, the aircraft becomes unstable. So just make sure your feet are alive on the rudder pedals, counteracting whatever forces want to push you off of straight. All right, that's the end of the runway, so let's let the tail come back. And remember, be very careful, don't brake until the tail wheel is firmly planted and you're not going to flip the aircraft. And let's go start our S-turns again.
The air is stale in here.
All right, so Heidi's saying she wants the door open. Let's go ahead and do that.
Fresh air, thank you.
Which really makes it obvious what she wants. All right, let's just come off of the runway here and park it. Turn it into the wind, and we can park. I'm just gonna inch it forward a bit to make sure the tail wheel's straight. Shutting down the Cub is super easy. All you do is move the mag switch to off. You're not supposed to shut it down with the fuel lever. And that is it. You can turn off the fuel as an additional safety measure, but we're pretty much done here. Let's go take a look at. All right, we're back. I'm parked in a tundra tire version of the Piper Cub with its nice bigger, lower inflation tires, better for grass, backcountry, bush flying. We're parked at Thomas Creek Airport in Idaho. I'm going to make a quick mountain flight over to Lower Loon Creek Airport. Those of you who have played FSX will remember that from the Mountain Flying Challenge. And let's check out the Tundra Tire Cub. So if we hop in the cockpit, the first thing you'll notice is that we've got rain effects on the windshield, which is great. I've also mercifully gotten rid of Heidi for this flight so that we can have a clear view of the instruments and the view outside the window. So as always, let's start up with fuel on, throttle cracked, carb heat off, mags both. Now, it's pretty cold out today here in Thomas Creek, Idaho. It's about below -20, so I'm going to prime twice. And I'm also going to turn on the cabin heat to full. All right, with the aircraft primed, fuel on, and mags both, let's stand on the brakes and let's try to start this engine. May take a couple tries. There we go. Back to the cockpit, and the oil pressure is good. Obviously, the oil temperature needs to warm up, so I'm going to move the throttle to 1,000, and we'll let it warm up. All right, the oil temperature is warm. Now, one thing I forgot to mention the last time is that there is no fuel gauge in the aircraft. Your fuel gauge is this dipstick here. It pretty much floats on top of a cork inside the fuel tank. As you use fuel, the cork sinks and this dipstick lowers. So you kind of just have to memorize the different heights. This is what a full 12 gallons looks like. All right, so with the engine warm, we can taxi, so stick back. Winds are calm, so I'm not too worried about stick position, but when you're flying a tailwheel aircraft, You should be flying it from chalk to chalk, as they say, from tie down to tie down, always thinking about the wind direction and setting your controls for the wind. Now, taxiing in a tundra tire aircraft is pretty similar. The only thing you'll notice is that the tires have a tendency to bite the ground a bit more. They produce more drag. In turns, it's more likely to drop a wing or ground loop, and so you just have to be mindful of that when taxiing with the tundra tires. And in fact, after landing, you should be extra careful not to brake until the tail is on the ground, because these aircraft that are STC'd with the tundra tires also come with enhanced carbon disc brakes, and if you slam on those before the tail wheel is on the ground, you will flip this aircraft over. All right, so let's do our run-up check. We'll check the controls. Just verifying instruments. Field elevation is 4,400 feet, so I'm just going to roll this back until the needle is pointed at the proper altitude. And gas, fuel is on, mags are both. We got a full tank. Carb heat is off. Let's do the run-up. Now, as with all A2A AccuSim aircraft, if you manage the engine or the aircraft improperly, you can damage it, and this damage will manifest itself. Sometimes it will manifest itself in ways that you can see on the instruments, like the engine will run roughly or it won't produce full power, and sometimes it will manifest in ways that are more insidious and that you can't see until the engine fails. So with all AccuSim aircraft, it's important to know how to operate the aircraft and the engine appropriately. All right. Now, for one person in the aircraft, we just set the trim just a tad nose forward. And with that done, we're ready to take off. We'll do a short field takeoff, so we'll go full power. And we'll let the nose come down and the tail come up just a bit. And then when the engine's producing full power, we'll come off the brakes, keep that tail up, and we'll accelerate quickly to takeoff speed. Now, with the tundra tires, there is increased drag, so the acceleration is going to be a little slower than with a normal Cub. But the aircraft is ready to fly, so we'll let the nose come up. And that's all there is to it. All right, so all we have to do now is follow this ravine to Lower Loon. As is always the case in mountain flying like this, you want to abide by the rules of mountain flying. In particular, never fly past the point of no return. In other words, never fly into a situation that you can't fly out of, and always make sure you have a path towards lowering terrain that you can fly down if you need to. There's other important rules like how to cross ridges and stuff. If you're interested, I recommend reading Sparky's Mountain Flying Bible. The Cub has an absolute RPM limit of 2,300 RPM. It's important not to exceed that limit, which is difficult to do unless you're in a dive. Cruise RPM is 2150. That'll give you about 75 miles an hour. If you want to go faster than about 75 miles an hour, sorry about that. You can increase beyond 2150 RPM, but the Cub is so draggy, it's not actually going to produce much airspeed increase. The other thing you'll notice is we're not going to get 75 miles per hour with the Tundra Tires Cub. Those Tundra tires add a little too much drag, so we'll be lucky to get 70. Alright, that's Lower Loon Airport up ahead. Lower Loon Creek is kind of a one-way in, one-way out airport. It's really only one direction to land. And if you have to go around, well, try not to, because you'll be coming up against terrain and it won't be easy. Let's get the carb heat on, start slowing down, getting ready to land. Now with these Tundra tires, like I said, you pretty much have to do a 3-point landing. These are enormous tires with a lot of drag. If you touch down with a wheel landing, they're going to bite into the ground, and they could rock the plane forward, give you a prop strike, even flip it over, which is why it's strongly recommended that you make all your landings 3-pointers. All right, I'm going to do a canyon turn here, get ourselves turned around, slowed down. nice and slow. For good precision landing, take the 3-point attitude, just stall it onto the strip. And then stick back on the brakes. All right, that's how it's done. Holding the stick back, let's taxi off the strip. Take the carb heat off. And we can park it.
The other thing you can do in the Tundra Tire Cub is water ski. If you have a tight sandbar that you're trying to reach, you can touch your tires to the water and increase your available landing distance. A2A has added custom water skiing physics for the Cub, though in my experience it still feels pretty unrealistic.
Okay, let's take a look at this Piper Cub now. As you can see, this one's on floats. Now, a Cub on floats, a Cub is already a pretty underpowered aircraft, so you stick it on floats and things just get even slower, but it still makes for a really fun seaplane, especially for local flights. So let's take it out and see how it performs. All right, in the cockpit, the first thing to know is we are tied up to the dock. You can't tell because it doesn't draw the ropes, but we are tied up to the dock. The way you know is if you go to the mini controls page, it says tie downs are on. So we have to turn off the tie downs. That unmoors us from the dock, and now we're free to float. Now, before we can start the engine, obviously there's no brakes on a seaplane, so before we can start the engine, we have to get the nose pointed to an area where we have lots of clear space to taxi and do our run-up. We do that by using the oar. You can see the oar here. If we click on it, it puts the oar in our hand, and then we can fend off from the dock by just pushing away from it. And then we can paddle by dragging the water like so, and that allows us to paddle safely away from the dock where we can start our engine. We put the oar away now, and we can start the engine. I know for the normal Cub, I said that you should never hand prop by yourself. Obviously in a seaplane, you always have to hand prop by yourself. No need to worry about the brakes, obviously, but typically you step out onto the sponson and then you hand prop it and then swing yourself back into the back seat. So let's do that. Carb heat off, fuel on, mags both, and then we'll go to the hand prop view and we'll position the propeller and give it a good pull. Starts right up. Back to the back seat, just verify the oil pressure's up, and we're good to go. Let's close the door now before we get too much water in the cabin. Now, before we start taxiing, we should lower the water rudder. That allows us to turn left and right. Whenever we are taxiing in the plow in a seaplane, we always keep the stick all the way back. Make sure we don't dig in the front end of the floats and water loop. And we can just go right to the run-up. We'll do a controls check first and an instruments check. Let me set the altimeter properly. Obviously we're at sea level. Fuel and gas check. And then now we can do the run-up. Obviously we do the run-up in motion. So we just have to make sure there's a nice clear area ahead of us. We're ready for takeoff, so let's raise the water rudder and go full power. Hold the stick back, the nose will rise. Let's allow it to rise. And then once our speed increases, we're ready to come onto the step. All right, and let's let the nose slowly lower. You'll hear the sound of the water change. And we are on the step. This is a low drag way to taxi. And we just hold it on the step until we have enough speed to fly. The airplane should pretty much lift off on its own. All right, and that's takeoff. Now, if you thought the climb was slow in a normal Cub, when you stick floats and a bunch of wires, struts on it, things get really slow. This Cub, the Floatplane Club, is definitely not a cross-country touring machine. All right, let's come back around for landing. So we'll get the carb heat on. Winds are calm, so we can kind of take off and land any direction. And let's just make a base and final turn here. Normally you always want to overfly the water surface. Read the water surface, understand the wind direction, look for boat traffic, look for possible hazards, make sure you can actually get back out. We're going to assume we did all that here because we just took off. And let's just go power idle. Obviously we got some hazards to the left there. All right, let's land. So we'll bring the power back, we'll get the step attitude, and we just kind of let it glide onto the step. All right, it's on the step. So now we just bring the stick back. We go from the step back to the plow. All right, we should come off the step momentarily. There we go. You can hear the sound of the water change and we are in the plow. Let's lower the water rudder, turn off the carb heat, and we'll water taxi it to the dock. A2A's added custom water physics, or so they say. I personally still think things feel a little rigid compared to an actual seaplane, but it's certainly improvement over other prepared seaplanes. Now, you never want to taxi up to the dock with the engine running. Kind of the art of being a good seaplane pilot is knowing exactly when to shut down, that your momentum can kind of drift you the rest of the way into the dock. And it's always smart to kind of nose into the dock. But before we do that, I'm going to make a quick 180 here so that we come in with the paddle to our right, lined up with the dock. All right, so it's good to come in at like a little 45-degree angle here. I give one more burst of power to carry us in, and then we will shut down the engine. And well, looks like we're not quite going to float the rest of the way in, but that's okay because we have ourselves an oar. So let's just paddle the rest of the way in. Nice long strokes is the trick here. Now the way you want to do it in real life, especially with a current like this, is you want one float to be at an angle and you want it to kind of whack the dock like this. Then you can hop out and just tie up that float really quickly. But obviously in prepared, things are going to work a little bit differently. So I'm just going to kind of position it more or less how I want it, and then we can tie it up. All right, that is it for this Let's Play edition for the Piper Cub. Like I said, there is a Cub on skis. I didn't demo that, but as you can imagine, like the Cub on floats, there's no brakes, but unlike the Cub on floats, there's also almost no friction. So you kind of just keep gliding and gliding and gliding after you land. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. My final review of the A2A Piper Cub is that it definitely has some excellent physics, especially in the air, and its ground handling. I still think the water physics have a long way to go, and some of the tundra physics and water skiing in particular also have a long way to go, but it is a very fun airplane to fly. It's responsive. It's very much a part of the environment that you fly it in. And Heidi's a joy to fly with as well. So if you're looking for a low and slow cruiser that you can take in and out of almost anywhere, I think this is the aircraft for you. Thanks for watching, and this is Tim Morgan signing off.